Dear students, today the topic is China's political history. The political history of China can be divided into three periods or phases. The first, the imperial period starting from 221 BC to 1911 AD, during which China was ruled by a series of emperors. Second, the Republican period starting from 1912 to 1949, when the country was plagued by civil war and foreign invasion. Thirdly, the Communist period from the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949 to the present. The first, from empire to republic, that is from 221 BC to 1911 AD. The Chinese Empire first took political shape in 221 BC, when a number of small kingdoms were unified under China's first emperor, who laid the foundation of an imperial system that lasted for more than 20 centuries, until it was overthrown in 1911 and 12. During those many centuries, China was ruled by many different family-based dynasties and experienced extensive geographic expansion and far-reaching social, political, economic, and cultural changes. There are so many aspects or reasons that the Chinese Empire survived for such a long time. First, the traditional order was supported by the Chinese society of Confucianism. This philosophy or the teachings of Confucianism stresses the importance of the group over the individual. Respect to one's elders and superiors, the importance of education, and the need to maintain social harmony, as well as the responsibility of rulers to govern benevolently. Confucianism contained a teaching that said the people had the right to overthrow an unjust ruler. Secondly, China developed an effective national government called ENC, with a merit-based bureaucracy, long before Europe took form in the 17th century. Chinese bureaucrats were selected through a rigorous examination that tested mastery of Confucian classics. And thirdly, the traditional Chinese economy was a source of great strength to the empire. Urbanization expanded in China much sooner than it did in Europe, and Westerners like Marco Polo, who came to China as early as the 13th century, were amazed by the grandeur of the Middle Kingdom's cities. Fourthly, the structure of Chinese society gave China great staying power. The vast majority of the village population was made up of poor and relatively poor peasants, but life was influenced by landlords and other local elites who worked with the national government to maintain and sustain the system. Now comes the Republican period, starting from 1912. Sun Yat-sen overthrows 2,000-year-old imperial system and established the Republic of China. The Republic of China was formed when the Qing dynasty fell in 1912. Sun Yat-sen was the father of the Republican movement in China. The organization became known as Kuomintang. The imperial rule was weak and unable to unite the country because of weak policies, corruption, and many foreign invasions. Japan was becoming regional power during this time and was looking for resources to support its economy and growing populations and powerful military. In fact, China fought Japan using the forces of Kuomintang and the Communist Party. However, Japan, which had superior weapons and forces, was able to gain ground on the Chinese. After the war, Japan was defeated and the control of power in China was still disputed by the Kuomintang and the Communist Party. Kuomintang was supported by the United States, and Communist Party was supported by the Soviet Union. The US supported only by giving weapons, but no combat forces. The forces of Kuomintang was defeated by Communist Red Army. Now comes to the Communist period. Chinese Communists win the Civil War and established the People's Republic of China, called PRC, in 1949. The Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward was a second five-year plan of the Chinese economy from 1958 to 1962. Mao Zedong, the chairman of the CCP, launched a campaign to reconstruct the country from agrarian economy to communist society through the formation of People's Commune. Mao wanted to increase food production and bring industrialization to the countryside. The Great Leap Forward was aimed to bring rapid development in both agricultural sector as well as industrial sector in China. However, many people died due to starvation. It was estimated that more than 45 million people died, and as many as 2.5 million people were persecuted. And lastly, 1 to 3 million people committed suicide. Now, next comes the Cultural Revolution, starting from the 1966 to 1976. The failure of the Great Leap Forward had weakened Mao's position in the Communist Party considerably. As factions began to form against him, so he called for a great revolution known as Cultural Revolution. The hidden enemies had to be identified and removed. Some of the enemies were the landlords, the rich peasants, the bad influencer, the rightists, the intellectuals, the politicians, and the artists. Now comes the goal of the Cultural Revolution. The goal of the Cultural Revolution was to preserve the Chinese communism by removing the remnants of the capitalists and the elements of the traditional Chinese society, that is, the four alls. They are the old customs, the old culture, the old habits, and old ideas, and to impose Mao's ideology in the CPC, that is, Communist Party of China. Some of the heroes of the Cultural Revolution were the Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, and Lin Biao. The next is the Red Guard. The Red Guards were a group of students from both schools and colleges who responded to the call of the Mao Zedong to carry out his program. The Red Guards destroyed antiques. Ancient texts were burned. Buddhist temples, churches, and mosques were all destroyed. They also humiliated teachers, monks, and landowner. The effects of the Cultural Revolutions. After the death of Mao, the Cultural Revolution came to an end. The Cultural Revolution damaged China's economy and traditional culture, while millions of people were persecuted and more than 20 million people were killed during the Cultural Revolution. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping became China's most powerful leader and launches the nation on a path toward rapid economic growth. Deng Xiaoping lost little time in using his power to put China on a path of reform that dramatically transformed the nation. His policies were a profound break with the Maoist past. State control of the economy was significantly reduced. Market forces were allowed to play an increasingly important role. Private enterprise was encouraged. The government allowed unprecedented levels of foreign investment. The Chinese artists and writers so the cycles of party control that had bound them for decades had greatly loosened. Deng Xiaoping took measured steps to revitalize China's government by bringing in younger, better educated officials. After decades of stagnation, the Chinese economy experienced spectacular growth throughout the 1980s. But in the spring of 1989, he and the CCP were faced with a serious challenge when discontent over inflation and corruptions, as well as desire, especially among students and intellectuals, for more political freedom, inspired large-scale demonstrations in Beijing and several Chinese cities. At one point, more than 1 million people from all walks of life gathered in and around Tiananmen Square in the center of Beijing to voice their concerns. A very large group of students set up a camp in the square, which they occupied for about 2 months. For quite a while, the CCP leadership, constrained by internal divisions about how to handle the protests and intensive international media coverage, did little other than engage in some threatening rhetoric to put off the demonstrators. But China's leaders ran out of patience, and the army was ordered to use force to clear the square on June 4. By the time dawn broke in Beijing, Tiananmen Square had indeed been clear, but with a death toll that still has not been revealed. Indeed, the Chinese government still insists that it did the right thing in the interests of the national stability. Now, from revolutionaries to the technocrats, that is starting from 1997 to the present. Although Deng Xiaoping remained power behind the throne for several years, he gradually turned over greater authority to Jiang, who, in addition to his position as head, that is the General Secretary to the CCP and chair of the powerful Central Military Commission, became president of the PRC in 1993. When Deng Xiaoping died in February 1997, Jiang was secure in his positions as China's top leader. Under Jiang's leadership, China continued its economic reforms and remarkable economic growth. The PRC became an even more integral part of the global economy and enhanced its regional and international stature as a rising power. Overall, China was politically stable during the Jiang era, but the country also faced serious problems, including mounting unemployment, pervasive corruptions, and widening gaps between the rich and the poor. Upon Jiang's retirement, Hu Jintao, China's vice president, became CCP General Secretary in November 2002. Both Jiang and Hu represented a new kind of leader for the PRC. Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping were career revolutionaries who had participated in the CCP's long struggle for power and were among the founders of the communist regime when it was established in 1949. In contrast, Jiang and Hu were technocrats, officials with academic training as engineers, who had climbed up the party ladder of power by combination of professional competence and political loyalty. At the time the People's Republic was established in 1949, China occupied a weak position in the international system. For more than a century, its destiny had been shaped by incursions and influence from abroad that it could do little to control. Mao made many tragic and terrible blunders during his years in power, but one of his great achievements was to build a strong state able to affirm and defend its sovereignty. China's international stature has increased as its economic and military strength have grown. Although still a relatively poor country by per capita measures, the sheer size of its economy makes the PRC, that is the People's Republic of China, an economic powerhouse. Its import and export policies have an important impact on many other countries and on the global economy. China is a nuclear power with the world's largest conventional military force. It is an active and influential member of nearly all international organizations, including the United Nations, where it sits as one of the 5 prominent members of the Security Council. China has become a major player in the world of states. So today we come to the end of this class, that is the chronology of the political development of China, or in short we can say the political history of China. So we'll meet again in the next class. Thank you.